When I was about 10 years old, I was home alone with my little brother Ethan. Our parents had gone out for groceries and left me in charge of watching my brother. They always warned us about strangers, especially when it came to phone calls. They had instructed us in the past that if we ever didn't know the person calling on the landline number, to say that our parents were busy and to never mention that we were home alone. I remember Ethan was playing with his action figures in the living room while I sat at the kitchen table trying to finish my homework. That's when the phone rang. I picked up the phone and answered hello, trying to make my voice sound deeper. There was a brief pause on the other end, and then a low voice said, "Is your mom there?" I hesitated, remembering our parents' warning. No, she's busy right now," I replied. The voice asked me where my parents were, and I quickly made up something about them being at a neighbor's house. The voice seemed satisfied and hung up. I shook it off, but a knot of worry formed. I went back to doing my homework, and not long after, the phone rang again. I picked it up with a bit more dread this time, hoping that it was somebody that I knew. It was the same voice again, asking where our parents were and when they would be back. I tried to sound calm and collected as I replied that they were still busy, but I could take a message for them. The voice on the other end didn't respond and just hung up. I glanced over at Ethan, who was now standing next to me looking confused and scared. The phone rang again, and this time I didn't think about answering. Instead, I told Ethan to come upstairs with me and hide just in case, since I was really scared now. We made our way up to my room, shutting the door behind us and hiding in the closet. I could still hear the phone ringing downstairs. Time crawled by slowly, and a couple more phone calls worth of rings went by. Then it was finally quiet. Just when I thought that I might be overreacting by hiding in the closet, we heard knocking on the front door downstairs. We listened in silence as we heard the front door, and then after a bit, the back door attempted to be pushed open. No more sounds came from downstairs for what felt like at least 10 minutes, until finally the garage door opened and we could hear our parents' voices downstairs. Relief washed over me as we ran downstairs to greet them, happy that they were home. I explained about the calls and the knocking downstairs to my parents. My dad quickly grabbed the phone and dialed the number. I don't know who he was talking to. I'm guessing a neighbor or the police. After that day, my parents reassured my brother and I that something like that wouldn't happen again, and that they wouldn't leave us home alone again until we were older. About 10 years ago, I received a picture from a random number. It was a normal afternoon, and I was scrolling through my phone when a notification popped up. I didn't recognize the number, but curiosity got the better of me. I opened the message, and I was taken aback by what I saw. It was a selfie of a woman in her bra and underwear, taking a picture in front of a mirror. The woman looked almost identical to my girlfriend, who is now my wife. At first glance, I even thought it was her, but after closer examination, it wasn't. The girl in the picture had the same long hair and similar facial features. The resemblance was uncanny, but I noticed tiny differences, like her lips were slightly fuller, and her hair had a slightly different shade, but still very minor differences. I stared at the image for a long time, trying to convince myself that it was just a strange coincidence. I couldn't shake the feeling that this was something more than just a random picture, and I decided to ask my girlfriend about it. We were sitting on the couch one evening, and I showed her the text that I had received. I explained the situation, showing her the picture on my phone. She examined it closely and stated that it was creepy and it was not her in the picture. Then she pulled out her own phone to show me something. She opened a message from a similar number which was one digit off from the one that had messaged me. My heart sank when she turned the screen toward me. It was a selfie of a guy in nothing but his underwear, taking a picture in front of a mirror. The guy looked almost exactly like me. Same build, same hair color, even the same slight stubble that I often had. We contemplated how this was even possible. The odds of both of us receiving nearly identical pictures from numbers that were so close seemed impossible. It was unsettling to think that there were people out there using our images, or at least images of our doppelgangers. We tried calling the numbers, hoping to get some answers. Each time, we were met with silence. No one picked up, and no one returned our texts. It was like those numbers didn't exist, or that they were intentionally avoiding us. As days turned into weeks, the incident lingered in my mind. I couldn't shake the feeling that we were being watched or targeted in some bizarre game. I even began to wonder if there was some connection between the woman in the picture and my girlfriend. Finally, I decided to take some sort of action to try to find out anything about the numbers. I went on social media and searched for the numbers, hoping to find anything that would explain what happened, but there were no leads. Just when I finally accepted that maybe it was just a prank, I received another message from the same number who had sent me the original picture. My heart raced as I opened it, bracing myself for something disturbing. Instead, it was a simple text message that said, "Stop looking." I was freaked out. Who were these people, and how did they know what I was doing? I never replied. Instead, I showed my girlfriend the message, and we decided to both block the numbers. We tried to put it behind us, but the strangeness of it has stayed with me to this day. I was hanging out with a couple of friends one Friday night, and we were bored. We had heard about a prank phone number line online that claimed to connect you to a real-life ghost, so we decided to call it. I grabbed my phone, laughing as I dialed the number. After a few rings, a voice picked up. It was clearly a recording, full of static and eerie sounds. I played along, making silly comments and pretending to be scared. The whole thing lasted about 5 minutes, and we hung up, thinking the whole thing was harmless. Later that week, things took a turn. I was at the grocery store, picking up some essentials when my phone buzzed. I looked down and saw a text message from an unknown number. It was a photo of me standing in the snack aisle looking at chips. I looked around for my friends since I thought maybe it was a prank from one of them, but it didn't feel right. There was a message along with the photo that said, "Pay $5,000 to a specific Venmo account or else." I thought it was a joke, just another level of pranking, but the texts kept coming. Each day I would receive a new message with images of me doing ordinary things, such as working at my job, sitting on my couch, even walking my dog. Each photo came with a similar threat, basically saying to pay up or else. I had no idea who was behind this. I didn't share my location with anyone, and my social media accounts were private. After a few days of constant messages, I decided to tell my friends. When I showed them the texts, their expressions shifted from amusement to concern. My friend Jason even suggested that we go to the police, but I hesitated. I didn't want to sound paranoid or make it seem like I couldn't handle it. Finally, after I received another picture taken from behind my house saying that I had 1 week, I decided to bring it to the police. I gathered all the texts and screenshots and drove down to the station. I explained everything to an officer, who seemed to take it seriously, thankfully. The officer told me they'd investigate and to keep my phone close, not to engage with the sender, and to report any further messages. Days passed and I didn't receive any new texts. I thought maybe the police were making progress or whoever was behind it had gotten bored. But then, on the last day of the week, I got one final message. It was a video of me sitting in the living room, and then the camera flipped around, and it showed somebody with their face covered holding a knife. The text along with the video said that my time was running out. I called the police immediately. They assured me that they were still on the case and I should stay put, and they sent officers to my house and ensured my safety. The officers told me that they couldn't trace the number and believed it was a burner phone used specifically for harassment. They reassured me that they would keep looking into it and suggested that I stay vigilant. After that day, the messages stopped. I never heard from that number again. I have a feeling that it had to be related to the prank call phone number that we had used my phone to call. The thought of someone out there knowing my routine still gives me the chills. I hope they never come back. I never thought I'd be someone who received disturbing phone calls. I'd get the occasional wrong number, the usual hang-ups, but this was different. It was a week before Halloween when the calls began. At first, it was just a voice that I didn't recognize, a raspy whisper that would hang up as soon as I said hello. After a few days, the calls became more frequent. I found myself checking my phone every few minutes, my heart racing whenever it buzzed. One night, as I sat on my couch, the call came through again. "I can see you," the voice said on the other end, low and chilling. I fired a couple questions back to the phone, such as, "Who is this, and how did you get my number?" There was a pause, then the line went dead. I didn't sleep much that night, due to the thought of someone watching me in my own house. The next day at work, I shared my experience with my friend Mark. He said that it might just be somebody trying to scare me, but that I should still report it. But I didn't report it, and I just hoped that it wouldn't happen again. But the calls continued. One evening, as I was leaving the office, I received another call. "I'm right behind you," the phone whispered. I quickly spun around and scanned the street, but saw nothing unusual and nobody behind me. I still thought it was a prank, and I chalked it up to coincidence. On Halloween, I decided to stay late and work to avoid the festive crowds. As the office emptied out and I packed up my things that evening, my phone rang again. The number was unknown, but the voice was the same familiar raspy tone which said, "You think you're safe? It's time to come out." It was nearly 9 p.m. when I stepped out onto the sidewalk to start my walk home. I pulled out my phone and tried to call my coworker Mark to see if I could get a ride. He didn't answer, so I began walking, but was cautious to check my surroundings every so often. I was certain that I saw a shadow suddenly move behind me. I glanced back, but I only saw the dim glow of a street lamp. I quickened my pace, trying to shake the feeling of being followed. My phone rang right after that, and I pulled it out hoping that it was Mark calling me back. Instead, it was the same number from earlier that night that I had gotten a call from when I was in the office. I chose to ignore it and began walking even faster. I continued to turn around and check my surroundings during my walk, and that's when I saw for the first time that I was being followed. I fumbled to call Mark again, constantly checking to see if the figure in the darkness behind me was speeding up or gaining on me at all. Mark actually picked up this time, and I sent him my location saying that I was being followed and I needed a ride. Mark must have driven fast, because it only took about 5 minutes for him to get to my location. As he turned onto the street I was on and approached me, I watched as the figure that had been following me began walking the other way and eventually disappeared. That night was the last time I got a call from that number. I'm hoping that it was just an awful prank, since it did happen right on Halloween, but it was so elaborate that I doubt it. It started one Saturday afternoon when I was sitting in my living room, scrolling through social media. I switched to a new phone and a new number a few months ago. My old number was still active, but I didn't think much of it because it had been quiet. Suddenly, my phone buzzed, and when I looked down, I saw it was a text from my old number. The message read, "I see you." It was odd because I thought it was just some spam or a wrong number, so I shrugged it off. A few hours later, another message came through saying, "You don't remember me?" I had forgotten to change my number on a few accounts, so it was possible that somebody had gotten a hold of it. I decided to reply, trying to keep it light, and I typed back, "Who is this?" The response was quick and said, "You know who I am." I didn't want to engage further, so I put my phone down and tried to watch a movie, but the messages nagged at the back of my mind. The next day, the texts continued, saying more creepy and odd things. I stopped replying for a while. Monday brought more messages, saying things such as, "I'm closer than you think," and "You'll remember me soon." I debated calling the police, but what would I even say? Somebody is texting me creepy things from my old number? It felt ridiculous. By Tuesday, I was on edge, and I couldn't focus at work. The messages were escalating, saying, "I know what you did last summer," and kept repeating, "You'll remember soon." I tried to block the number, but it kept coming through, so I finally decided to involve the police and see if they could do anything. I explained the situation, and they filed a report. The messages continued for all the next week, and I tried to ignore them as best as I could. I finally got a call from the police a week later. They had traced the text back to an old acquaintance from high school, someone I hadn't spoken to in years. He had been using some sort of app to send the messages from my old number. That night, I confronted him at his house, and his parents answered the door, so it ended up working out perfectly to involve them as well. It was awesome to see his face when he came downstairs and saw me talking to his parents and showing texts that he had sent to me. So that was the last problem I had with the kid, but it was still scary before I knew who was behind it all.